analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's down in Washington, D.C. That's his lot in life. And he follows all the policy stuff coming out of Washington. There's so much stuff coming out there that all I do is just read his stuff because I know he's focusing on the important stuff. And if he's looking at it, I'm going to look at it. Nathan Dean, thanks so much for joining us, Nathan. Talk to us about tariffs. I think we've got Liberation Day next Wednesday. What's the feeling inside the Beltway about how this administration is pursuing trade policy?
Yeah, so, April 2nd, Liberation Day, it's going to be a really fast day, lots of red lines on the terminal that day. But I think that what's going to happen is you're going to see a combination of tariffs that actually come in immediately. President Trump, we've been talking about automobiles all week, for example. You're also going to see some additional tariffs that are maybe just announcements saying, and I think this is going to be more in the reciprocal camp, saying like a tariff on a certain country. We're looking at the European Union, and we're interested to see what the White House does in terms of value-added tax, because the White House has taken the approach that that is considered a tariff. And then subsequently, you are going to see the creation of this external revenue service. I think this is just a rebranding of an already existing agency or an already existing group. And I think this is more of a PR exercise to showcase how many tariffs come in. So ultimately, the Republicans can pass a tax package later this year. But again, lots of things happening, and we just continue to go back to our clients and say, there's a lot of bluster out there, but incrementally, these tariffs are coming on board. And for those in the auto space, you know exactly how the impact is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone really is bracing for April 2nd. What are people feeling on the ground as you talk to sources, especially since we did get that tariff news for autos that was a bigger magnitude than expected?
So, this is where it's kind of hard because there is a boy crying wolf mentality going around some people, and especially I think in some of the investors I talked to from New York, because they say that President Trump says we're going to do reciprocal tariffs, we're going to do on everything, and then Bloomberg News has great reporting saying no, it's going to be sectoral instead. But I do think there is this anticipation that something is going to happen on Tuesday. Look, President Trump has hyped it up. So if it's automobiles, it's pharmaceutical potentially, it could be reciprocal tariffs on countries like that VAT. Something is coming on April 2nd. I would look for the reporting over this weekend to see if we get any indication of that, because usually it will start to leak out, I would say, about 12, 24 hours in advance of Tuesday. But, come Tuesday, there's going to be a lot of red lines on the terminal.
It's interesting, Nathan. We were talking to Major Garrett at CBS Television, and he's going to be hosting Face the Nation this Sunday. He says their program has been out to the White House asking for a voice on tariffs, and they've gotten no response. And he was suggesting that perhaps that means the White House is not ready to really talk about their policies because they haven't decided on it yet. Would that surprise you?
No, actually, I think that's in line with just our expectation as well. I mean, look, ultimately, it's just one person. This is President Trump. So, yes, you could talk to the Department of Commerce. You could talk to the U.S. Trade Representative. You could talk to state. And you're going to get three separate different answers on what this tariff policy is. Now, why do we think President Trump's doing tariffs? Fairness. But ultimately, I think a lot of it is trying to drive manufacturing back to the United States. But if you are another country and you give President Trump a great deal, he could say, I want to have a great deal. So, again, it's very hard to predict, but incrementally, these tariffs are coming on board, and we just continue to advise our clients that you have to prepare for them because you don't want to be the boy who's cried wolf too many times.
Mm-hmm. Nathan, what's the latest with this department that's been in all the headlines? What's going on with DOGE right now?
So, Bloomberg News is reporting that DOGE has just gone over to the SEC this morning. This is the first time that, it's been reported that they're over there. But Elon Musk also just gave a little bit of a tidbit yesterday saying that he anticipates a lot of DOGE work will be up by the end of May. And that could be good for Tesla investors, especially those that want Elon Musk to return back to the car company. So I would say that, the DOGE committee is still going through all the different agencies and they're still looking for areas to cut. But in terms of cutting the deficit, they really need Congress to do that because mandatory spending, there's not so much DOGE can do there unilaterally. So I would just say that I think what's going to happen is the DOGE is going to continue to work in these agencies for the next few months. But as we get closer to this tax extension debate and this mandatory spending and debates on Medicaid, for example, that's when I think a lot of the big ticket items are going to be debated because DOGE, I don't think, is going to be able to touch the mandatory spending right now.
All right, so we got the DOGE, we got the tariffs. Big one for Wall Street is taxes. Talk to us about just the broad tax package and the tax discussion as it kind of fits in with budgets and all that kind of stuff. That's the big stuff.
Yeah, this is the big, beautiful bill that President Trump likes to talk about. Essentially, they want to extend the 2017 tax cuts. Now, in order to do that, using this process they called reconciliation, Congress has to figure out how to pay for around $4.6 trillion. And they have lots of time. They have to do it by the end of this year. But next week, we are seeing momentum on the Senate adopting a budget resolution. Now, if you see this headline comes out, says Senate adopts tax package, they're adopting a blueprint. There's no specifics in here. All they're doing is adopting a blueprint that allows them to continue to negotiate. Now, Speaker Johnson wants everything wrapped up by Memorial Day. I don't think he can get there. I would think it's going to more likely be after the August recess. But the biggest question when it comes to the taxes is that, yes, I do think the taxes are going to be extended, but what's the impact on the deficit? Because if Republicans can't figure out a way to make this budget neutral, then, potentially you could get in a situation where the deficit increases even more than what the DOGE committee is trying to do. I think they'll eventually try and figure something out, but it's one of the biggest questions for investors at this point.
Mm-hmm. And how are Democrats viewing this?
The Democrats are out of the picture on this because what the Republicans are doing is they're using this process called reconciliation. This is the same way President Biden put the Inflation Reduction Act, the same process that President Obama put Obamacare through, but allows you to avoid the Democrats and avoid the filibuster. And you need a majority vote in the House, a majority vote in the Senate. And this is why Elise Stefanik was pulled back from the UN ambassadorship, because the Republicans need every single vote in that House in order to move this tax package forward.
Mm-hmm. So what's the timing here of some of this? Like, again, I go back to, I'm going to pay attention when there's money involved, when Congress is going to be allocating money here. So for some of these tax packages, is it really a year end? Do we have that much time, or do we have some interim mileposts that need to be hit?
Well, the biggest interim one, I would say there's really three things the market should be paying attention to for 2025. The first is tariffs. We talked about that. The second is the debt ceiling. Now, there's a lot of debt ceiling discussion of when this is going to happen. Most people think that X date, the date in which Treasury runs out, is going to be in late July and August. Congress is going to have to figure out something. Now, President Trump wants to include this in that one big, beautiful bill, but we're telling our clients it doesn't matter whether it's included or not. We do think Congress is going to raise the debt ceiling, and I don't think, you could see some headlines and some scary headlines associated with fixed income markets, but I think Congress is going to be able to figure that out. And then this tax debate, extending it by the end of the year. And I would just say that, Congress in Washington, whether it's Republican controlled or Democrat controlled, they don't like doing things until they absolutely have to do it. So you see this debate, you see these political headlines, and you see these red lines on the terminal. But I don't think until they're actually faced with this idea that unless they do something, then bad things happen, that's when you get a deal.
Headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, Trump, Carney agree to meet after Canada's election. So again, maybe they can dial the rhetoric down a little bit there. Well, speaking of raising the debt ceiling, my number 4 offspring called me yesterday. He wanted to raise effectively the debt ceiling. I said no, and this is what Congress has to say. I told him, do one of two things or both. Cut your spending or generate more revenue for yourself. And that's basically, I don't know why Congress can't say that.
If only it transferred. I'm curious here, we're looking at Paul Atkins, right? This is Trump's nominee to the chair of the SEC. He's saying that his top priority in that role would be establishing a new framework for crypto regulation. What are you hearing on this?
Yeah, so yesterday, Commissioner Atkins, former Commissioner Atkins, had his Senate confirmation hearing, and it was very positive for the crypto industry. In his opening statement, he said, look, and I'm paraphrasing here, I want to bring regulatory clarity to an industry that doesn't have it. And that's just the noise to, that's what essentially Robinhood and Coinbase and a lot of these other crypto players want to hear. Now, we do think he's going to be confirmed. We don't think that there's really going to be any hiccups with that. And I think he's going to have 3 major priorities in 2025. Crypto, essentially making the enforcement risk decrease to the point where it's not so much of a risk anymore. I would also note that crypto and the SEC only has authority over securities. So for things like Bitcoin are considered commodities, Congress still needs to act on this. The second thing is just bringing capital formation back. This is, a lot of things in terms of private credit, making it easier for investors to invest into private funds. There's some rulemakings that he potentially could do there. And then finally, market structure. Now, this is important for like the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. Commissioner Atkins didn't really exactly like the way that market structure developed back in the early 2000s. So I think he could do some tweaking there, but that's going to be more of a long-term strategy than a short-term.
You are a fount of knowledge, dude. I don't know how you keep it all straight. Nathan Dean, senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence down there in D.C. He's in the swamps. We throw him down there, and somehow he figures it all out, and he puts it down. He's got great research. Go to BI Go. Look at the policy stuff. He tells you what's going on in Washington, what it means for markets, what it means for individual industries, individual companies. That's the kind of research Nathan and his team are doing down there in Washington. And as we